Chapter 13. Mr. Eddington? Darcy touched the dark-headed musician gently on the shoulder, trying not to startle him. He's fully grown now. When Damon turned his gaze from where he'd been sitting at the recording console, his eyes were blank and rimmed with red. She heard the bones in his neck crack with movement as he reached up and removed his headphones. Huh? What? The alien has achieved its maximum growth potential, she explained patiently. It won't do anything now unless we arrange it. Why don't you go home and get some rest? For a moment, Darcy thought he was going to refuse. She wondered how he could stay here like this, night after night, living on the fat-loaded fast food substitutes that they had delivered. Personally, she longed for a freshly cooked meal, something actually put hot onto her plate directly from the stove. She'd had way too much of cold and greasy over the last 5 days. Finally, though, Damon stood. Yes, all right. His concentration seemed to be off kilter. Then he brightened. And I'll get the master sound discs too, for my composing. The musician rubbed a hand over his face and looked surprised at the uneven growth of stubble there, usually so carefully clean-shaven around the double points of his sculpted goatee. You'll feel better after you manage to get some real sleep, Darcy said as she offered him his coat. Yes. Damon agreed absently. He took the coat and squinted at it as if he didn't know what it was, then blinked and draped it over his shoulder. The corner of his mouth turned up as if he'd finally realized how far gone he'd seemed. I guess I'm pretty well burned out. We'll see you in the morning, Darcy said, intentionally turning towards the door that led out of the apiary. Damon followed her lead unconsciously, but stopped and looked back when the door slid open. Take good care of him, he instructed her and Michael solemnly. Of Mozart. Darcy and Michael both nodded, and after another second of hesitation, Damon stumbled out the door and was gone. Neither of the bioengineers said anything for quite a while as they moved around the apiary, finalizing the computer data and organizing the massive paperwork that had been generated by the phase of the project. So, Darcy said eventually, after all those hours of alien screeches and Damon's chatter, the unaccustomed silence was getting to her. Do you think he's crazy? Michael shifted his attention from the last of the data he was inputting into one of the computers. Crazy? He took a moment to eject a disk from one of the floppy drives, labeled it, then slipped it carefully into a storage case. No, he said at last. I don't think so. He's dedicated to his music, that's all. That dedication requires methods that are somewhat out of the ordinary, but... Michael shrugged and gave her a small smile. He's intense. I believe that's what the school generation calls it these days. Darcy slid her hands into her pockets, then drifted to the glass and watched the creature inside for a few seconds before replying, But it seems like such a waste, she said distantly. Using the alien like this. We have a spectacular opportunity to study its behavior, yet all we've done is lock it away and fill its cage with a bunch of microphones. I've always wondered if these things are capable of attachment. Attachment? Michael stood and stretched, then walked over and stood beside her to peer at the alien. Inside its cage, Mozart shifted into a jittery crouch, as if the unseen presence of the two humans posed a threat. Yes. Darcy bit her lip absently, then rubbed her temples. Attachment in a nearly one-on-one situation like this, born from simple familiarity. This isn't a med lab filled with chimps and rats and a couple of dozen scientists working under genetic managers and research assistants. The three of us, and maybe Ahiro once in a while, are the only people this alien will know. Perhaps there's a chance it would begin to recognize us, to accept us. Michael ran his fingers over his chin and frowned. "And then what?" he asked pointedly. "Do we try and train it? Even if the study was successful in the form of actual results, what would humankind do with the information? We're dealing with a life form that has a brain with functions we aren't even close to understanding. Your interest in this is high, so I probably don't need to tell you that the military has poured millions into attempts at cloning sterile replicas for warfare purposes. So far, they've gotten zilch. The alien's biological makeup is so convoluted, we can't duplicate it yet. Plus, I'm sure there's a whole underlying branch of the government that we've never heard about that exists just to keep tabs on other countries around the world and to make sure that if we can't replicate them, they can't either." "I know all that," Darcy said. "I'm quite up to date on my alien research, thank you." Still, her words weren't biting, and she inclined her head towards the creature in the cage. "Don't you find it at all interesting that the woman who originally discovered these things claimed that she and her crew were responding to a beacon sent by a derelict ship? We've always assumed these things are instinctive beings with no thought but to kill and procreate. But what if such a ship had actually existed? The government still maintains that her story was a myth and that she died of natural causes on a prison planet where she was incarcerated for military negligence. But what if it's the government that's lying, Michael? Others claim she wasn't sent to the prison planet at all, but was a refugee from yet another disastrous encounter with the aliens on her escape craft. If her claims were true, it could mean they possess at least enough intelligence to use space travel as a means of transportation." Michael shook his head. "No, I don't buy that at all. You don't have to know how to pilot a vehicle to jump in it when it starts to move. Anyway, that spaceship thing is speculation only. Her story was never proven." "It was never disproved either. Instead, or so they say, she was thrown in prison on charges that most people still find extremely questionable. Surely I'm not the only scientist to look at these aliens and notice that in captivity they seem to be significantly underdeveloped. Some of the eggs laid in the pseudo-nests now have 3 petals rather than 4, as though they're regressing genetically. Why is this happening? If it was once possible for them to build a ship and travel through space, why can't we communicate with them on some level?" "There's no proof that they can build anything," Michael insisted again. "And even if they could, why would we want to communicate with them? You're not looking at these creatures objectively. They aren't civilized beings, Darcy. If, what's her name? Ripley. Okay, Darcy. Don't you see all the holes in your theory? You claim that Ripley says she responded to a beacon from an alien ship, but I distinctly remember that she never specified it was an alien ship, just a derelict. You've rearranged the facts to support your case, but they're inconsistent. No one ever said the aliens used the beacon to draw her ship down to the planet's surface, if there even was such a beacon. It was probably a help signal sent by the space jockeys on the derelict." He looked at her and shook his head. Now you're acting like there's probably a whole planet of these things somewhere else beside the place we've always believed they originated. Michael waved a hand towards the cage. Jesus, Darcy. These homeworld creatures are the scariest, most dangerous things the inhabitants of Earth have ever discovered to date. Do you actually think we'll ever be able to control them? No wonder the government wants to squash any notion that a whole world of these things exists somewhere else. Darcy's expression twisted into a sneer. Because it's frightening, we should ignore the possibility that it's true. Now there's an intelligent way to deal with something. She glanced towards the cage. And control them? God no, Michael. Darcy's mood abruptly changed, and she chuckled as the alien suddenly reared to its full height and swung its head, as if it had heard her voice through the soundproof quartz window. Then the creature flipped lazily onto its back and stared upwards, no doubt inspecting the roof of the cage in its own unknown way for a non-existent path to freedom. Darcy's laugh made her co-worker raise his eyebrows. What's so funny? No human being has ever survived a face-to-face, weaponless encounter with an alien without being cocooned as a future host. The ones who have later turned out to be already impregnated with the embryo of a drone or a queen. Control them? Face it, Michael. Darcy's tone was cynical, her eyes wide but far away, as she gazed at some imaginary situation beyond the one that existed on the other side of the quartz wall. A person could spend years working with one of those things, and I sincerely believe there would be recognition between the alien and the researcher. A bond between scientist and subject, perhaps. That's what I'd like to find out. But they'll never be truly trainable or controllable. No matter how much time is invested, I think the most you could ever hope for would be for it to pause a moment before it kills you.